I'm State Representative Mark Gillen, and welcome to Legislative Report. We have a very special program today. In the Rotunda, we had POWs and MIAs assembled, and the House of Representatives and the Senate was honoring our POWs and our MIAs. And I have one of them with me today, Charles Egresitz. I had to work on that name, Charles, but
that's good.
I think it may have landed it.
That's good.
Sir, you served in Korea during the Korean War. You were a POW. You were captured, and it intrigues me to learn a little bit more about the circumstances surrounding your capture in Korea. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Is it before or after now?
You're in the Army. You're in Korea.
Okay, this happened on June the 14th. At the time, I was sitting up on top of the bunker with a pair of binoculars. I was watching tanks go across the Chinese line and fire.
Our tanks?
Yeah. They turned around and it was firing at the Chinese. So at nighttime, there was 4 squads went out, different directions, in Kumsum Valley. The squad I was in, we went out, they set an ambush up. But the Chinese had one before we could set up.
They ambushed you?
Yeah.
Did you immediately know they were Chinese?
Yeah. Well, we know it because the Chinese was in that section where in that Kumsum Valley. That's where. And I got wounded and.
You were shot, shrapnel. You took
took the bullet right through my leg and went. Then there was another BR man. He got shot between the eyes and come out the eyes. So he was captured the same time I was. There was a lieutenant. First time he was out on patrol with us. He was an artillery man. He got hit pretty good, and they captured him too. They hung him up on a tree, had a booby trap set, and he kept begging somebody to shoot him. One of our men shot him then. You know, he was pretty well wounded and suffering all that there. He was hit pretty good. So one of the guys said, I was told this after I came home, repatriated when I come home. I was told that. And I was trying to find out who all got away, who escaped the ambush. So there was I think 3 of them escaped, got away, and I think it was 3 wounded. They got away too. And then the one was a sergeant. I keep in touch with him. We exchange Christmas cards. That was it.
What period of time were you interred?
It was right soon it got dark. We went out, so it happened, I guess, around about 11 o'clock, somewhere around there.
All right. Were you taken somewhere, or you temporarily interred where you were at and then repatriated? What was the transition in terms of your capture and eventual recovery?
Well, they dragged me and John Aker, he was the BAR man.
Mm-hmm.
They dragged us and took us to a cave. It was a big cave inside, and they examined us, looked at us and everything. I don't know what they did, but they didn't give us any medical attention. So then we start traveling. He took him a different way. I went another way. I traveled mostly all night. We went from the cave, we went to a bunker where they had like one big straw bed. And about early in the morning, here come, I think it was about 15 South Koreans. They had all rope. They had rope from one man to the other, had prisoners. So we all slept on that big bunk at night. So when I got up in the morning, they were all gone. When I woke up in the morning, they were all gone. And from there, I went to a place they called the mining camp.
You're traveling by vehicle, or you're walking?
Walking.
You are walking, and you've got a bullet wound in the leg.
Yeah.
All right.
We travel mostly at night, though. And at the mining camp, that was a drop-off point. From there, you go to a camp. So at the mining camp, I met a lieutenant and a private that was in one of those tanks. One of the tanks got knocked out, and they were the lieutenant. He was going down there looking for gold in the stream. When the stream is muddy, that's when the mine was working. If it was clear, the planes bombed the plant. And so from there, then I went to a camp 3B, or 3A, they say too. It was sort of like a labor camp. And we carried material, supplies, carry logs and that thing. There was only approximately about 125 in the camp. It was mostly a labor camp in a way. We didn't have too much during the day, but during the day they would take us down a schoolyard. It was like a village. They cleaned everybody out the village, and the Chinese took that village over for prisoners. So they used to take us down to a schoolyard. We called it an idiot class. You would criticize yourself, then criticize the next guy to you. That's what they do, and we called it an idiot class. Some of the Chinese could speak English better than I could, because they went to college here in the United States. And some didn't speak English. That's when we used to joke then, make jokes back and forth. Of course, they couldn't understand what we were saying.
That's a good thing.
Oh yeah, that was good. And
let's fast forward for a moment to repatriation. You realize you're going to be set free. What emotions are running through you? What are the circumstances surrounding that?
I figured I'd never get out of there, to tell you the truth. When Eisenhower made president, I figured, oh, we're going to get free now. We're going to send more men over. And no, that was it. I just was praying and wishing to
So the 1952 election of Dwight Eisenhower buoyed your hopes, because here's a military man, Supreme Allied Commander, he's going to get tough.
Yeah, that's what a lot of us thought.
How were you even aware that Eisenhower was elected at that point? How did you get your news?
From another prisoner coming in.
So he told you what was going on in the outside world. You are back home. You greet family. What are the emotions? Having been captured, having been treated brutally, having been shot, you return home and you see family. Describe that moment.
It was pretty good. They asked me where do I want to go. I didn't want to go to Valley's Forge because there's a lot of collaborators there. So I took Washington, the hospital there. I can't think.
Walter Reed.
Walter Reed. I spent about 2.5 months in Walter Reed there.
Recovering.
To recover. And finally my family found out I was alive. They didn't know I was alive. One of the prisoners was in the little switch. He contacted my family that was still alive. So that was real good. I mean, and my parents went to come down to Walter Reed. And
they're excited to see you.
Yeah.
Beyond belief that you're alive. You were missing. They knew it. They didn't know what the outcome of this was going to be.
Right.
A lot of joy. Charles, you're an American hero and a national treasure, and I hope to amplify on this particular interview at some point in time. We are going to break. We're going to head back to the Rotunda in the Capitol at our ceremony to honor our POWs and our MIAs.
I want to personally thank everyone for being here today as we honor our prisoner of war and missing in action veterans today with the dedication of the official POW MIA Chair of Honor here at the State Capitol building today.
Legislative leaders, veterans, former prisoners of war, on behalf of Governor Corbett, it is an honor for me to be here today to pay tribute to Pennsylvania's POWs and MIAs. As the Adjutant General of Pennsylvania, I am very fortunate to oversee and command and control all 19,600 members of the Pennsylvania National Guard, but also supervise our outreach to veterans, where we run 6 veterans' homes and conduct programs for Pennsylvania's nearly 1 million veterans, making us the 4th largest state in veterans population. That's why today's event is so very important, because too many members of Pennsylvania's service members never made it home to receive the full measure of their benefits or open arms of their loved ones. Just last week, I was greatly pleased to be in the Union League of Philadelphia and listen to a stirring rendition and speech given by Commander Charlie Plum. Commander Plum was a Navy F-4 Phantom pilot that was shot down over Vietnam, spent 6.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. As he described the great difficulties he had to endure with the physical torture and torment that he lived through for those 6+ years, but however, the mental toughness that he gained, that he said, they may have beaten me physically, but they never beat me mentally or morally. A tremendous story of determination on Charlie Plum's part. Before I read Governor Corbett's proclamation, I'd like to end my remarks by saying, God bless all those who served and who served our nation in uniform, especially those who entered as POWs. And may God continue to bless our great country of ours. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the history of our nation has been built upon the triumphs, struggles, and sacrifice of the many men and women who have endured battle and hardship in defense of our nation's security and freedom. And whereas we have supported our soldiers in both wartime and in peacetime, and always look forward to their safe return. There remains, however, a group of dedicated men and women who have never returned home, whose sacrifices and ordeals will never be known but not forgotten. They are our prisoners of war missing in action, known as POWs, MIAs. And whereas we celebrate the return and hope for the safety of our troops currently overseas, we must also remember and pay tribute to more than 91,000 servicemen and women who are still unaccounted for since World War I, and more than 142,000 American service members who have been captured in prison, and more than 17,000 died while prisoners of war. And whereas our veterans and their families, communities, and nation seek within our memories of the missing and unaccounted for to find a renewed commitment to the ideals of which they fought and the strength, unity, and resolve to uphold their mission today and throughout the year. And whereas the National League of Families POW MIA flag symbolizes the United States resolve to never forget our POWs and those who served our country in conflicts and are still missing. Whereas the POW MIA National Chair of Honor is to remain perpetually empty, to remember that even though our soldiers are not here, there still is a place for them. And whereas the National Chair of Honor program is led by Rolling Thunder, which is founded to ensure our prisoners of war and missing soldiers are never forgotten. In recent years, commemorative chairs have been placed in prominent locations across the United States. And whereas the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania joins in recognizing this commemorative chair honoring POWs and MIAs at this time of remembrance, where today citizens of the Commonwealth can come and reflect on the service of our prisoners of war and missing in action. Therefore, in honor of POWs and MIAs, I, Tom Corbett, Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, do hereby proclaim October 15th, POW and MIA National Chair of Honor Day in the Capitol. I join these citizens of this Commonwealth and remember these American heroes, past, present, for their future sacrifice and patriotism. Given under my hand the seal of the Governor at the City of Harrisburg in the year of our Lord 2014 and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania 239, signed Tom Corbett, Governor. Thank you all very much.
My son, Sergeant First Class Bren Adams, was in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard for 18 years. He loved serving his country, and while waiting for his body to be returned, I had the feeling, as I'm sure many of those who have prisoners of war and missing in action felt, but I knew where my son was coming to and that I could put him to rest. But those families of POWs and MIAs do not have that privilege to be able to do that. It is imperative that we keep the promise of No Man Left Behind. We still have more than 91,000 Americans still missing in action. Therefore, as Americans, we need to resolve to never forget our prisoners of war who served our country in conflicts and are still missing in action.
At this time, I would ask our honored guest to join us, the Adjutant General, and the four chairmen in the unveiling of the POW MIA Chair of Honor.
Welcome back to our legislative report. I have with me today Frank Lashinsky, who is a POW from World War II. Frank, if we could get right into it, you have a fascinating story to share. You were shot down not once, but twice. Tell us about that first experience.
First time we bombed the Ototal oil refinery up in southern Poland near Auschwitz, and we were damaged up at the target, and we were flying by. We ended up being alone by ourselves, and we were losing altitude, and we jettisoned everything we could out of the plane to keep from, to maintain the altitude. And we finally got about 10,000 feet. We were heading back to Italy. Our air base was near Cernola, and we had lost a lot of fuel also. And we realized that we were not going to be able to make it to Italy. That chances are we might have to crash land in the Adriatic Sea, which we didn't want to do. So there were areas that our headquarters had marked on a map of Yugoslavia, probable chance of being picked up by friendly forces. So we picked an area that gave us about a 90% chance of being picked up by friendly forces, and we bailed out. and I was the youngest on the crew, and I just turned 20, and everybody was afraid I may not jump out if they left me in there by themselves. so they made me go first.
And this is it a B-24 Liberator?
B-24,
and then
yeah.
you have that right on your tie tag.
Yes,
there.
right. We had no parachute training, and when I jumped out, I pulled a ripcord. Nothing happened for a while, and I thought they're supposed to get a big jerk, and I looked, and there was no parachute. And so then I grabbed it with two hands and pulled it, and then there was a big jerk, and I came down, and it landed in the bottom of a sinkhole. And when I got up to the top, there were a lot of people around there, and there was a group of women and children heading towards me. And on the other side of the sinkhole, there was a group of men with rifles heading in the same direction. So I thought I'd better make sure they don't take a shot at me before I get a chance to tell who I am. And I headed made sure I was in line with the women and the rifles, so they couldn't take a chance and get, and I told him I was an American, and finally one of the men shook, said it's American. He shook my hand, and they said there's a German garrison down in a valley, and they probably saw you coming down. They probably sent patrols up here, so they said we have to get out of here. So they took me to a barn, and one of our other crew members, Eduardo, was in there, and in the barn, and we took off our flying clothing, and they made a two-wheeled ox cart and put our clothing on it, a load of hay on the ox cart, and we sat on the tail end. Craig King was the other one, and myself. He came from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and they sent a patrol. All the roads in the area were dirt roads, and they sent a patrol to the first bend in the road, and we started heading in that direction. In the meantime, they also sent another patrol on the high ground alongside the roads, and with hand signals, the signal was okay. And we kept on sort of leapfrogging until it started to get dark, and we ended up in what evidently was a headquarters for the partisans, because
the Tito partisans in Yugoslavia.
And we they gave us a little bit of something to eat and told us to sleep there. Meantime, they had all activity going on, and we got a little bit of sleep, but not too much. It was kind of a little excited.
A little excited, I would think.
But the next morning, I went outside to see what it looked like on the outside, and a man dressed in had like a vest made from goat skin with the hair hanging down. I said to myself, he looks like a typical native. Walked over to me and he said, "Good morning, sir," in English. And I asked him where he learned his English, and he had been in the United States working in lead mines in Pueblo, Colorado. And our last training base place we just came from was Pueblo, Colorado.
Wow.
But anyway, then we continued for 3 more days, going higher up into the mountains, and we were passing burned-out German tanks, trucks, and all along the way. And we got to the town of Sansky Most, and Sansky Most was completely held by the partisans, and we were free to walk the streets if we wanted to, and and everybody would salute us and recognize us as Americans. And when the balance of our crew 3 days later got into Sansky Most, there were a total of 45 airmen that they had in that town there. And the British had parachuted in a radio and a radio man who was set up in an attic in the town, and he sent out military information, and also I guess the different the airmen who had landed in there. And anyway, several days later, we when nightfall came, they told us all to head for a meadow outside the town, and there was a big contingent of partisans again who came with us, and a radio man brought his portable radio, which was a big thing, but he set it up in a meadow, and soon there was it was dark by now, and soon you could hear engines overhead, and with the radio and communicating however he did it, he said there was a friendly airplane, and so he told the partisans, and they had lined up in two lines of men with spaced about 10 yards apart each, about the width of a runway apart, and each of them had wooden torches. And when the partisan commander shouted out that whatever he did, they lit the wooden torches, and they in effect were the landing lights. And the C-47 came and landed between them, and they extinguished the torches as soon as it passed the plane. And the plane turned around, and they put on board anybody who was injured or wounded first, and then they went by seniority. The plane could only hold 21 passengers, and so there, as I said, there was 45. So the commander shouted again, and they lit up the torches. And the plane took off and went back to Italy, brought them back, and I had to wait for the third plane to come in. It was about 3 weeks later, because it was just a plain ordinary meadow, and the weather had a lot of influence on whether they could come in, including how soft the ground was and everything like that. So at night we could go. It was like the town was really controlled by partisans. I guess they had their version of the USO, because occasionally in the town square they would put on dances and music and entertainment, for everybody there. And when we went to one of those, and all of a sudden some guy came running into the square, and he jumped up on the platform and said something. And with that, all the partisans, everybody was armed, including the women. You can see them with the bands of their ammunition, a couple of hand grenades hanging off their belts. They pulled out their guns and started firing them in the air. And we were wondering what in the world was going on. And finally, I located somebody who could speak English. He said, they just announced that Belgrade, our capital, was freed by the Russians.
Frank, you've been very courageous throughout your life, not only in World War II, but to share this story on camera, and we are extraordinarily grateful for your service. We want to thank you for joining us here today, and thanks for spending time in the Rotunda at the special ceremony. And I make a commitment to you as a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. We'll do everything that we can to bring Charles Adams back home. That's all the time that we have for Legislative Report. If there's anything that we can help you with on any state-related issue, please contact our office in Flying Hills in Berks County, as well as our Harrisburg office, and that information will screen to follow.